This will be part 1 of my Outlander Season 7 Episode 13 review. As always, if you are looking to avoid spoilers from the show or the books, please do keep on scrolling. So this week's episode is titled Hello Goodbye, which is very much appropriate for the storyline going on with Roger and Buck this week. We can see that we are back in 1739 Scotland, and this shot of the mountains is a little bit of foreshadowing for the conversation that Roger and Buck are about to have as the episode opens. Now, Buck says to Roger that the mountains look the same no matter what time he's been in, and Roger recognizes one of the mountains and pieces together that the stream they are standing beside is close to where Bree currently works in the future. The Orakti Dam Tunnel is built in or around a portal that Bree felt when she got trapped inside there earlier in the season. And so Roger starts to piece together that if that tunnel has a portal in it now in the current time, then back here in 1739 there must be standing stones there, and maybe that is where his father Jerry came through. They decide to look for the standing stones to see if they can retrace Jerry's steps and hopefully find him through this method. Then we are back in Lallybroch with Bree and her current storyline, which, again, if you remember from the events of last episode, Rob Cameron had broken into her house. Bree is keeping him in the priest hole, which in the show this looks more like a closet than how it's described in the books. In the books, it is like an 11-foot deep literal hole in the house that if you are stuck at the bottom of it, there is no way for you to crawl out of it. So much more scary for Rob than this closet that he's in. And I think this change, even though I'm sure it has to do with set dressing and all of that, does have implications for his escape later on. While Bree is trying to interrogate him, Rob is making a point to put some seeds of doubt in Bree's head by saying that it's been a while since he left Jem where he left him, and she will never be able to find him without letting Rob help. But Bree knows that he's not actually going to help her at all. We get a shot of her locking Rob inside of the priest hole, and again, the change of how the priest hole is set up does make this seem like it's a little faulty of a lock when you consider that he's basically just stuck in a closet. And I'll touch on this change later on in my review as well, because I think there's something important to note that the show has changed again. When Mandy comes out and asks Bree where Jem is and if they found Jem, Bree decides to bring her to the police station because she realizes that Rob has cut the phone lines, and we get this close-up of the airplane. I think this is a slight nod to the books or potentially foreshadowing in the show to Bree deciding to take Jemmy and Mandy to America later on in the storyline to be safe there with Joe Abernathy. But again, there's been a lot of changes to the storyline that I can hash out in a separate video, but I do think this is kind of a nod to that potentially taking place further down the story. Now at this point, when Bree asks Mandy if she can feel Jem, she still says no. So as far as their ability to feel one another when they're not together, Mandy still cannot feel Jemmy at this point, even though we as viewers know that he is in the tunnel still. So we see them leave and drive towards the police station, and then we cut to Jemmy in the tunnel, still there crying for help, before we get a cut to the title card of the episode. Now in this title card, this is the plane that Roger's father, Jerry Mackenzie, flew in, and it's a Spitfire plane. And if you can see, hopefully they put it on here, in his mission that he was flying this plane in, there was cameras, you can see one under here, attached to his plane. He does touch on this later in the episode, but it was an undercover mission for MI6. And as a friendly reminder, the person running that mission is Bree's stepfather, Frank Randall. Then back in Philadelphia, we are at Mercy Woodcock's house, and this conversation, the dialogue takes place in the books, but the setting is slightly different in the show. In the books, this is at a camp, a military camp, and Ian does call out that Rollo is starting to seem old, and that again is foreshadowing to his story coming up later. And when Jamie walks in, he says, "Like us all, my nephew," in Gaelic. So they have this moment in Gaelic where they're able to kind of go back to their roots together. And again, this is a scene taking place right after Jamie revealed himself as being alive to Ian, so they haven't really probably had a moment to really decompress from that. Now in the books, since they are on a war campsite, Jamie had offered his tent to Denzel Hunter to host a meeting amongst fellow Quakers, and Denzel had just invited Ian to attend. Obviously that is not happening in the show, but the reason why Ian is entertaining going to this meeting is because Denzel is trying to get married to Dorothea Gray, who I don't think we're going to see her at this point. I'm pretty positive they're just going to write her storyline out, but that is the niece of Lord John Grey and his brother Hal. Ian and Jamie have kind of the conversation I think he wouldn't want to have with his own father, but has to have with his uncle, and are talking about the wedding night. Now again, in the books, they aren't having this conversation right before the wedding, but in the show, they've really condensed everything. And I think it's important to remember that when they were filming this half of season 7, they had not gotten a green light on season 8 yet. So they've removed so much of the storyline and sped everything up, condensed it all very much. And this episode, I feel like, is another place where you feel it very, very much, how quickly things are moving. I thought it was funny how they made a mention about Dougal's men talking to Jamie, giving him advice before his wedding night, and he makes the exact same face referring to Angus and Rupert. I thought this was just kind of a funny callback to season 1. And then separately, we see Claire and Rachel, along with Mercy Woodcock, getting ready for the wedding in the women's side of things. Now, if you're curious and want to read the actual wedding and how it happens in the books, that's in chapter 94 of Written in My Own Heart's Blood. And it's a joint wedding between Denny, Dorothea, Rachel and Ian, and then Hal Grey is there, along with Lord John Grey, and Jenny Murray is there because, again, in the books, she does come over to America with Jamie on the boat. Fergus and Marsley are there. So there's a lot of different people involved in this wedding in the books than what we get in the show version. Mercy says 2 things that are important here. She points out that she looks beautiful in the dress even though it is borrowed. In the books, Jenny Murray sews her dress, so that's a slight change. And second, she says that she wishes that they would be able to stay longer, and that is a info dump for the viewer to learn that Jamie and Ian have received orders from the military and are getting ready to leave in a few days' time. Rachel shares her concerns about this with Claire, and Claire has this beautiful line of dialogue that I think really harkens back to the meat and potatoes of her experience in seasons 1 and 2, where she says that their love of their men becomes the shield of armor that they wear and fight alongside them with. And I just think that's a great kind of synopsis of their role in this story. Another change, obviously, in the books, this wedding is also Denzel Hunter's wedding, but in the show they make a point to say that they sent for him to come from the fort and attend the wedding, and we get to see an update here on Henry Grey. By this point in the books, there's a lot of things going on with the Greys that I really don't know how much they're going to remove, but his father is in America at this point, Hal Grey, the Duke of Pardlow, and is not supportive of him and Mercy or Dorothy and Denzel. And on top of that storyline, Henry's brother and Dottie's brother, Benjamin, has gone missing, and that is a whole other subplot that very strongly involves William and Lord John. So again, I don't know how much of that they're going to include or remove given the pacing and what they've chosen to remove so far. We see Denzel and Jamie having a conversation where he reveals to Jamie that he did run into Lord John. He helped tend to his eye and help free him because he found out that he was in danger. Now, Jamie has like an inkling of guilt on his face, and I think it's important to remind show watchers that Jamie fights with his feelings about Lord John for a long time. He goes back and forth over how he feels about what he did for a very, very long time, and I think the show hasn't really fleshed that out fully yet. So I think they've done a less than ideal job of conveying his inner turmoil here. And I'm out of time, so come back for part 2.